Go ahead, Carol.
Hi, I am Carol Marilyn McGavin Benson. I was born on the 7th of April, 1929, which makes me 60 years old, but I don't feel that old. I was born in Spanish Fork, Utah, to Hattie Parkinson McGavin. Her real name is Harriet, but she used to chase us with a broom when we called her that. So I always call her Hattie when I tell people what her name is. And to E. Cecil McGavin. And someone once said to him, "You must have a hell of a first name to go by the name of Cecil." His first name is Elmer, and he didn't like his names. I have many memories of my childhood, many happy memories. We had a real happy family. My father was a seminary teacher, so we spent the first 10 years of my life in Spanish Fork. And he would always come home for his lunch hour where he taught seminary down there. And I remember when I was in the first grade, June and I had a bicycle. We got a bicycle. And I was so excited when I finally learned how to ride my bike. And he was home for his lunch hour, and he came out to watch me. And my bike, I fell off of it and got a bad cut on my knee. And I remember how kind and sympathetic he was and how proud he told me he was because I knew how to ride a bicycle. And then when we moved to Salt Lake in 1938, we were really happy, when we met our neighbors. It was hard to move at the age of 10 because we had lots of friends. I had lots of friends in Spanish Fork. But we soon got acquainted in Salt Lake and have lived here ever since. And some of the things I remember in my childhood is my sister was 18 months younger than I am. And we were always playing together. We spent many happy hours together. But when I had a girlfriend come over and we wanted to go someplace, or she would invite me to her house, I didn't want to take my little sister. And so this one day, June was tagging along, and my friend says, "You can't bring your sister, leave her home." And June spoke up and said, "How would you like to be little sister?" And I thought that was so cute. Needless to say, she went along with us. And then, one childhood memory I have of my brother Carl, when he was, less than 2 years old, we dressed him up like a little girl. We put a little dress on him and a bonnet and put him in a little red wagon and put a little blanket over him and took him for a walk around the block. And when we were stopped by one of my friends, and I told her that was my little sister, she says, "Oh, I always thought you had a little brother. I didn't know it was a little sister." And I says, "Oh, come on, Dorothy, don't even listen to her," saying that to Carl. Of course, he didn't know what was going on, but we got a big laugh out of that. And then I remember once this neighbor boy had a dead bird, and he threw it at my sister, my little sister, and she was only about, I'm sure she could have been over 7 years old. And I picked up a rock and threw at him. And, oh my goodness, it was quite a calamity. He just was screaming his head off. And I ran in the house and hid. And nobody was home. My parents were not home. And so this boy's father came in looking for me. So I just got back of some clothes in a clothes closet and hoped that they wouldn't find me. And then for 2 weeks after, for me to go to school, I had to go clear around the block so I wouldn't pass their house next door. for them to see me. And I was just trying to protect June. I thought that was a terrible thing for him to throw this dead bird and hit her with it. Such memories. Uh, Chores, we used to help out with the chores. I remember we had to make our beds every day and help with the dishes. We had an apple tree and a plum tree, and I think more fruit fell on the ground than whatever got canned, because we always had to go out garbage day or the day before to pick up all the fruit that had fallen to the ground. And can you believe my mother at age 91 is still doing that? My brother has threatened to come over and cut the tree down, but he hasn't done it yet, so we still are picking up the fruit from the tree that falls on the ground. I remember a school teacher I had who was very special. Her name was Miss Bowen. I can't even think of her first name right now, but she was my first grade school teacher. And I had a birthday party. I remember all my birthday parties. We always had a nice birthday party. And she brought me an umbrella. And oh, I thought that was the most wonderful gift I had ever received, an umbrella. But it never rained. And the kids would laugh at me if I took my umbrella anywhere when the sun was shining. So, but I do remember how I cherished that little pink umbrella that I received from my first grade teacher. My father, as I said, worked with the seminary system. He taught seminary at Granite High and East High and West High, I think all the high schools. And then in 1940, he also worked at the church office department for many, many years. But in 1947, he was offered full-time work at the post office. Now, he had been working part-time there for several years during the Christmas rush, and of course made far more money doing his part-time work than his full-time for the church. So in 1948, I think it was about that year, he was offered full-time employment. And Gordon was on his mission in France at that time. And then I was called on a mission to the Central Atlantic States, North Carolina and Virginia. And of course, with 2 children on a mission, he needed that extra money. So he did work full-time at the post office at that time, but continued his heavy engagements with lectures throughout the valley. He'd go for stake priesthood and sacrament meetings, and there wasn't a Sunday for years and years that he wasn't giving a sacrament meeting talk. He had a great memory and was really in demand. And of course he wrote probably 25 books on church history and the Book of Mormon and various things like that. He had a remarkable memory. He remembered the dates of everything. And even up until the time of his death in 1975, I can remember he was in a hospital bed in the living room, and people were still calling him to ask him where they could find such and such a subject or such and such scripture. And not only could he give them the exact chapter and verse, but usually the page number where he would find that information. It's just too bad that the rest of us didn't inherit that photographic mind that he has. I'm hoping that it'll crop up with the grandchildren and future posterity. Although we do have a good memory, I remember things very well, but it's nothing to compare with my father. My mother, I'm anxious to get an interview such as this of my mother because I don't really know that much about her. I know that she attended BYU for a couple years. She taught school for a short time. And then during World War II, she worked at the small arms plant. And I believe it was for about 18 months is what she worked. But during this time, she was always very happy that they were able to get their home paid off, and I think she bought her a bedroom set up with the money. So she was always very proud of that. I do remember at this time that she was working that she fell on the ice and broke her wrist. So it was necessary for me to help with the washing. And at that time, to get hot water, we had to make a fire in a little monkey stove. And I, for some reason, was very frightened of fires. It was very difficult for me to light a match to a fire. But during this time, I learned how to do it. But it's always frightened me to be close to a fire. I don't know why I had that fear. But I can remember picking the clothes up from the washing machine and running it through the, oh, what do you call that? Where you put your clothes, the wringer, I guess you'd call it. It's not like the wonderful automatic washers we have today. I have a cousin Murray from Portage, Utah, and he and his girlfriend came to our house that very day, and they were on their way to Elko to get married. They were going with, oh, somebody was driving him down there. Seems like it was his uncle Dave Hoskins. And so anyway, they asked us if we wanted, I was about probably 15 years old, and my girlfriend was over at my house, and they wanted to know if we wanted to go downtown to see all the celebrating because the war was over. And I'll always be grateful that I went because, of course, I didn't know anything was going on. So we went, he dropped us off downtown, and the traffic was stopped everywhere, and people were dancing in the streets, and oh my, so happy that this long war had finally come to an end. In soon, let's see, I must have been 17 years old when I met Leonard. We double dated. I was going with a fellow, Ray Allen, and he was going with Janet Kirby. And Ray and Janet attended the Presbyterian church. And so one of their friends was getting married, so Janet invited Ray to come and double date. So that was the night we went to Centerville, Utah for a wedding reception. And Janet, I think was a bridesmaid, she stayed inside and we were outside. This was in August that we met. And the fellow I was with kept making comments about the church not being LDS. He was very, anxious to say anything he could against the church. And I remember when the reception was over, Ray made the comment that Mormons think that if you get married in the temple, that you would be married for all eternity. And then he started to laugh. He thought that was really ridiculous. Well, I knew Janet wasn't a member of the church, but I didn't know anything about Leonard. And so I started to defend the church, and I just really quoted chapter and verse and so forth and so on and defended the church. And this really impressed Leonard because, as it turned out, he too was LDS. And so anyway, we double dated several times. And then Janet went to New York. She was an officer in her sorority at the university, and they had some big convention back in New York. And Ray went to Texas the very same week. So Leonard and I were with each other every night that week. And then when Janet returned home, I just thought, well, this is over with now. Leonard will be with her. And much to my surprise, he kept calling me. And it wasn't long before we fell in love with each other. And we went together for over a year. And then Leonard received a call to go to Brazil on a mission. And he left on Christmas Day of 47. Can you imagine having to leave on Christmas Day? And I was working at the telephone company, a long distance operator, and that was the biggest day of the year. There was no way that anybody could take that day off. No one had Christmas Day off. So I went to my CO and asked her if it'd be all right for me to take my lunch hour to change it. I think it was about, instead of 4 o'clock, if I could go at 6 o'clock, so I could go down to the train depot and tell Leonard goodbye. And she arranged so I could do that. But as soon as his train left, I had to come back to the telephone company. And I remember some lady asked me how it was, to tell him goodbye or something. And I had just gotten along beautifully. I was so proud of myself. And when she asked me, I started to cry. And so my chief operator, who was a member of the church, because I don't think anyone else down there would have done this, she told me to go in and take a rest period and just to stay in there for a while. And I always loved that woman, more so after that than ever before. I thought she was very compassionate. But Leonard served his mission for 2.5 years. He was in Brazil. And then the last 18 months of his mission, I went on mine to North Carolina. And it's interesting how I went. I was only 19 when I went on my mission. I had my 20th birthday in the mission field. But I went to, first of all, my mother went to Joseph Fielding Smith to ask if her daughter could go on a mission. And he says, you show me one place in the scriptures where it says anything about women preaching the gospel, and I'll sanction your daughter's going on a mission. Doesn't sound like he thought women could do much, does it? So that didn't discourage me. I stopped in and talked to Elder Benson, Ezra Benson. And I just told him that my fiance was on a mission in Brazil and how much I would like to serve a mission. And he was so kind and wonderful. He said to me that he served his mission in England, and then after he came home, his girlfriend that was waiting for him served a mission in Hawaii. And I said, oh, what a shame that she wasn't out the same time you were, to give you you could have got married a year sooner. He says, that's right. That's the way it should have been. So he told me that if I didn't have my mission call within a week, to let him know, and he'd see why. And then what's more, he asked me where I'd like to go. And of course, I just told him I didn't care anywhere. And he says, oh, isn't there someplace you'd like to go? And I said, well, you know, my mother was in Virginia, in West Virginia, and she just thinks that's the garden spot. And so lo and behold, I got the Central Atlantic states, which included the states of North Carolina and Virginia. And it was a wonderful 18 months in my life. I'll always be grateful for that experience. And I certainly know that the lady missionaries were able to teach the gospel to many that the elders could never have reached. And they certainly have a place in the church and in the missionary system. And then, when Leonard's mission was over, and mine was supposed to be over, my mission president told me, President Price, that he wanted Leonard to come to meet me in the mission field to make sure that our romance was still there, because he had released a lady missionary just a month before that. And after she and her boyfriend got together, the romance was over. They didn't get married. So President Price wanted me to remain in the mission field until at least 21 months, and I had only been out 18 months. And so Leonard met me I met him, I should say, in Washington, D.C. And oh, he was so surprised to see me. He didn't know I was going to be there. This Lieutenant Renches he and his wife drove me to Washington, D.C. from Petersburg. It's about 90 miles away. And I went over to the airplane, and as Leonard climbed down the steps, I called to him, and when we saw each other, he grabbed my hand and he shook it for 10 minutes before he even gave me a kiss. And the next day we had a missionary conference, and President Price came up to me and he says, I don't even have to ask you how things are going. He says, I will make arrangements for your discharge. And we told President Price that we wanted to drive home, and did he know anybody that would accompany us? And he knew a family that wanted to come to Salt Lake City. It was a woman
Salt Lake to Ogden.
To Ogden, and so this woman, her 6-year-old daughter, and her mother, the grandmother to this little child, accompanied us. And we went to New York, and we went to Niagara Falls. Oh, we had a wonderful trip home. And I remember at Niagara Falls, Leonard says, enjoy this because this is your honeymoon. And I thought,
don't leave out Nauvoo.
Tell him not to talk. And so we stopped at all the church spots, Hill Cumorah, Nauvoo. We just had a great, great trip home. We probably took a week to come home. And when we delivered this family in Ogden, she handed us a $5 bill. I was absolutely flabbergasted because the motels we stopped at each night, Leonard had a room of his own, and then I stayed in the motel with these 3 people, and yet I had to pay half of the motel bill. So they sure did get a bargain price. I bet they never had a trip like that before or since. But we got home in August, and then we were married on the 23rd of October, 1950. And then we had 5 children in the next, let's see, 50, 60. In the next 13 years, we had our 5 children. And then Leonard received a call to go to Brazil on a building mission. And it was at this time that we took the children out of their school, and we were down there for 2.5 years. And this was a very choice, wonderful experience. When we were called to go on our mission to Brazil, we had just had our baby Mark. Mark was born just a few weeks after the President Kennedy lost his baby. And this little baby of the Kennedys was premature, and everybody was really saddened because this little baby died. And I remember Dr. Wood telling me that they do not like to take these babies early because many times they have this hyaline membrane or something like that, and that they're very, they just didn't like to take them early. I was having lots of complications, toxemia and all this stuff, and so even though Mark wasn't due until the 16th of October, it was more than a month before that the doctor said that they're going to have to take him. And I remember promising the Lord that if this baby would be perfect and there would be no health problems, that no matter what I was ever asked to do in the church, I would do it willingly. Well, we had our perfect baby. He was a cesarean baby and just beautiful. We were just so happy and thrilled with him. And my golly, it wasn't 2 months later that we were asked to go on this building mission to Brazil to take our family and go down there. And I just knew that I had to say yes no matter what. There's just no way we could get out of that one. And it was really a challenging experience. I remember when I told Dr. Wood that we were going to go down there, he put his arm around me and he says, "You're the bravest person I've ever met." Well, I didn't know what he meant at the time, but I soon found out. You know, you can read about these countries in a geography book, but it's not like being there. But it was a real choice experience. I think it was truly the highlight of Leonard's life, the accomplishments that he made, the two beautiful chapels that he built in Brazil. And we had lots of great times down there. I think the children have very fond memories of Brazil, learning a new language and attending church and meeting the members and the many things that we did.
Wasn't Shauna baptized in the ocean?
Shauna was baptized. Her birthday was on the 23rd of July. Now you'd think that would be a hot summer afternoon, but down there their seasons are just reversed from ours. That was one of the coldest days of the year. In fact, it was so cold that she had to wait till September to be baptized because the water was so cold in the river. We didn't have any baptismal font at that time. It wasn't until Leonard built one that baptismal fonts were available to be baptized in. So Shauna was baptized with an 81-year-old woman, and it was really to see this little old lady going out in the water to be baptized, and then this little frisky Shauna jumping up and down and being baptized at the same time. But it was a real choice experience, one that I'll never forget. It was even a cold winter day in September when this baptism took place. But the children just had many great experiences. They learned the language very quickly. They attended school down there. They wore uniforms to school. All the children in the school wore the very same uniform, a little white blouse and navy blue skirt, and the boys wore navy blue slacks. And I think that they'll always have very fond memories of Brazil. When we returned home from Brazil, we had bought a lot in Holiday before we went down there and had sold our home on Winder Lane before we went down there. And so we built our beautiful dream home when we returned and moved into the Holiday 10th Ward. And we had some really choice friends and neighbors that we still love very much in this ward. Soon after we arrived here, I dreamed one night that they asked me to be Relief Society president. And most of my dreams don't make sense. Things just go in and out of my mind, and it doesn't really make any sense at all. But boy, this one night I woke up and I woke Leonard up and I told him that they're going to ask me to be Relief Society president. And he just told me to turn over and go back to sleep. And so lo and behold, just a few days later, the bishop called me and asked me if I could come down to his office. And Leonard had taken the Boy Scouts to Granite High to go swimming. And I was out in the garden working, and oh gosh, mud all over. So I told him to give me a half hour so I can clean up, and I'd be down there. So I rode my bicycle down there. It was fun going downhill, but a little bit harder to come home. But anyway, he just told me that I had been the counselor to the Relief Society president, and I knew that she wanted to be released. Her husband had died a year or two before then, and she was going to move into a condominium near her daughter. And so anyway, I just hadn't no idea that they'd even think of me. That dream I had did not mean anything to me. I just thought it was a dream. And so when he asked me if I would do that, my dream came back to me, and I thought the Lord was warning me. And so he said, as a rule, they like the husbands to come in too at the same time, but inasmuch as Leonard was gone with Boy Scouts, that they just wanted to see how I felt about it. And for me to go home and talk it over with my husband, and they didn't have to have their answer then, but that they would like me to do that. And I says, well, I've already told Leonard about it. And so Bishop Anderson says, oh, what did he have to say? And I says, oh, he just told me to turn over and go back to sleep. But it made me realize how very close we can be to our Heavenly Father, that He does give us these warnings. And I remember in my patriarchal blessing, it told me that things would be made known to me through dreams, that events in my life of importance would be shown to me through dreams. And this has happened many times to me, many times. And so I served as Relief Society president for 3 years. The very day that I was put in, it was the first Sunday of August in '72. And it was raining, and thunder showers, and thunderstorms, and lightning. And it was just kind of one of those flash floods. And my first thought was, as I sat there in sacrament meeting the day I was sustained as the president, that the Lord was trying to get a message to that bishop. But as we came home, they were constructing the freeway several blocks east of us. And this construction company had this great big reservoir of water. And the banks of it flooded, and that water absolutely gushed down the hills west of it, which was in our ward. And so we were all going to go to an open house for Alex Leslie, whose son had his missionary farewell that day. But instead, we all went home and put on our slacks, some Levi's, and got our mop sticks, some buckets. And I guess for the next 2 weeks, spent hours and hours and hours cleaning up the homes, because many of them were filled right to the whole basement was filled with mud and dirt. It's just beyond description, the damage that was done that day. So my first week or two as Relief Society president was spent working every single day doing this. And I've never seen such a labor of love. The men were hauling out mud and water, and everybody just worked together. Groups of people prepared meals for us. It was truly an experience I'll never forget, and I've never had that experience since then, but made friends at that time that are still very dear and close friends to me now. And our children at this time were going to the Churchill Junior High. They were very active in the church. I remember one year Craig took the first place in a speech contest the MIA had. Shauna did, and Sherry won a seminary contest. We were really proud of our children and the participation they made. And of course, all children do funny things. One story that really stands out is when Mark was born, some neighbor came over and told us what a darling baby, how beautiful he was, how cute. And as soon as he left, Bradley, 4 years old, climbed up on the dresser so he could look in the mirror, and he says, "Mom, am I cute?" We always got a bang like that. And then I remember when we used to have our family prayers, Mark prayed, he always blessed President David O. McKay and his 12 hostiles. We got a big bang out of that. We'd bite our tongue off to keep from laughing out when he'd say things like that. Shauna was our thumb sucker, and she would suck her thumb, and she went up to this neighbor when she was 3 or 4 years old that was smoking a cigarette. And she says, Paul, Heavenly Father doesn't like you to smoke that cigarette. And he looked down at her and he says, Shauna, Heavenly Father doesn't like you sucking that thumb. Well, he gave up his cigarettes, but Shauna didn't give up her thumb for a few years, or a little later than that. What else has happened? The church has always been very important to me. I was brought up in a home where they truly loved the Lord, and my parents instilled this within us. And I know that the Lord sustains us through our trials. He's very close by. He's there to help us if we'll just ask Him for His help. And I've had so many experiences showing how close He is and how much He truly loves us. And I know that this is the true church of Jesus Christ, that Joseph Smith was a prophet, that through Joseph Smith, the very same gospel that our Savior taught when He was here upon the earth has been brought back to the earth. And I suppose the greatest gift a child or a grandchild could give to their parents and grandparents is to have this love of the Lord, this desire to serve their fellow man, and to serve in the church in any position that they're called to. I don't think there's anything that can bring a parent greater happiness than to have a child that feels this way about the Lord also. And I know that the last few years of Leonard's poor health, it was just 10 years ago now that he fell and severed his urethra, and it just seems like from that day on his health has gone down. A few years later he had a pacemaker put in after a cardiac arrest, and it's just been one thing and another. His diabetes flared up, and he's had this urethra operation every year, and through his cancer and the trials that we've been through with that, it just seems like the Lord's there with His arm around you, giving you the strength to go on to help you. And I know that this is very important to me, that we just couldn't get along without His help. And it's just my greatest desire that all my children and grandchildren will have this same love for Heavenly Father.
Well, we're glad that you're in your 1989. We're in the home of Carol and Leonard Benson in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Give me your full name, date, and place of birth.
Leonard Daniel Benson.
Where were you born?
Bags, Wyoming.
What date?
What date? November 18th, 1925.
Does your name mean anything? Were you named after a relative, or did your mom just like that name?
Leonard was after my mother's father, Leonard Fleming. Daniel was after my father, parents.
Give us your mom and dad's full name, when and where they were born.
Okay, my mother, Annabelle Fleming, she's born in Florida. My father's Charles Roland Benson, born in Wisconsin, Mineral Point, Wisconsin.
What memories do you have of What memories do you have of your growing up years?
My memories growing up is that I was raised on my father's cattle ranch. I remember putting up hay and riding the range in Wyoming. My father had 200 head of cattle.
Did you have to drive them to market or anything, or take them to the railway station, or?
I didn't do that, but I heard them on the range.
What memories do you have of your brothers and sisters growing up?
Well, I remember that I was the youngest. My brother was 12 years older than me, and my sister's 10 years older.
And didn't you have a sister that passed away when you were growing up?
I had a sister that died when I was in the Navy. She was 22 years old. And I had another sister that died when I was 4 years old. She was 10 when she died.
Those must have been hard for your family.
Oh, yes.
Were they accidents or illness?
My sister recently died when she was 10 years old with scarlet fever.
Oh gosh, were there a lot of other children that got sick at that time?
Well, being I was only 4 years old, I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
What chores did you have growing up?
What chores? Well, milking the cows, feeding the pigs. You know,
Did you have to gather up eggs?
yeah, gather up eggs. How about that?
What kind of work did your dad do?
Well, he owned a cattle ranch. He had 200 head of cattle.
Did he do anything else on the side to bring money in, or was that his full-time
That
job?
was full time.
Did your mom work outside of your home?
Yes, she helped my father on the ranch.
What memories do you have of your school, teachers, or special things that happened?
Well, I remember I went to school in Bags, Wyoming. When I went to high school, I moved to Salt Lake and went to West Hattie.
Did you have a one-room schoolhouse in Bags, or was it like a regular school?
They are? Oh, thank you.
Well, the school was a big block building. There was different rooms in the school.
Did you take a bus or walk or ride a horse, or how'd you get to school?
Well, look, yeah, I took a bus, rode a bus to school. Yep.
Was there any special teacher that you remember, or any trouble you got into that you want to tell us about?
That was over close to 50 years ago. I don't remember too much about it.
When did you decide to move to Salt Lake City?
Well, my mother brought me to Salt Lake City when I was 13 years old. 1939.
Was there a special reason that you decided to move to Salt Lake?
Just that my mother liked Salt Lake. And she wanted me to be here.
Was she a convert to the church? You said she was born in Florida.
Yes. Nephi Jetson was a missionary that converted my mother and her parents to the church.
How about your dad? Was he a convert also?
My dad, I can remember him going to the river to be baptized. My sister Rita Mae, before she died, asked my dad to be baptized in the church, and he was.
Oh, okay.
What do you remember about the Depression?
This is what I remember about the Depression in the 1930s. When we had traveled to Rawlins, Wyoming, 70 miles south of Bags, Wyoming, of the trains, freight trains, was covered with fellows on top of the trains, riding on the trains. And I remember my dad would sell his 2-year-old steers for $20. Now they'd be over $600 to $800.
Gee. Was it hard times on the ranch, or were you okay as far as having food to eat? And
We were just fine. It was not hard times. No, we had my parents had a garden, over a couple acres of a garden. We had plenty of food, and we had beef to eat.
What are your memories of World War II?
All right, in World War II, I joined the Navy just before I turned 18 years old. I was in the Navy 2.5 years during World War II. I was overseas in the South Pacific for 2 years.
what was your job in the Navy?
I was a motor machinist, and I switched to carpentry.
Did you help build What did you help build as a carpenter for the Navy?
Well, when I got the carpenter's rating, I wasn't in the Navy very long.
Did you get to come out of the Navy when the war was over, or did you get out before then?
When the war was over. When I joined the Navy, I made a mistake. I passed physically strong enough to join the regular Navy, so I joined the regular Navy. When the war was over, I couldn't get out because I was in the regular Navy.
Oh my goodness. I mean, they wouldn't let you out? They just said you had to stay in there?
Yes, I had to get special permission to be released.
Oh my goodness. So what was the reason that you gave, or they just decided to be nice to you?
Okay, the reason that they gave is because my parents owned the cattle ranch, and I was needed to help on the ranch.
Well, that was a pretty good deal then.
What are your memories of your mission? Where did you serve, your companions, and experiences?
Okay, my mission was in Brazil, and I will tell you some of my experiences as a missionary in Brazil. I'll tell you about this story when I was a missionary. There was a fellow that when he was walking to work, he would pass a jewelry store. And at the jewelry store, he would set his watch. And he did this every day. And one day, the proprietor of the jewelry store asked him why he stopped to set his watch every day. And the man said he was the one that rang the 7 o'clock whistle. And the jewelry store owner said that he set his clock with the 7 o'clock whistle.
Oh, that's funny. What, when you asked to go on a mission, were you surprised that they sent you to Brazil?
I don't remember about that.
Was it easy for you to learn the language?
Brazil, I thought, was a hard language. No, it wasn't easy for me.
In those days, you went on your mission and learned the language while you were there, right? They didn't send you someplace
That's how
special.
it was. That's how it was.
Do you remember any of your companions?
50 years ago, that's too long ago for me to remember companions.
Do you remember?
I remember one that I had from Mesa, Arizona, Bowen.
How many members in the church were there? Were there a lot of members when you went?
All right, in Brazil, I had about 500 members, and a lot of them were Germans, and they apostatized. A lot of them apostatized from the church during World War II because they were Germans.
I guess I don't understand why they apostatized because they were Germans. Because of Hitler, you mean?
Well, I had to think about that. Well, look, yeah, let's see. The Germans were enemies of the Americans.
Oh.
I guess that's the reason why they apostatized. They was converted by the Americans.
How did you meet Carol?
On a double date. We went to a wedding reception. I met her at a wedding reception on a double date.
When you were married, where did you go on your honeymoon?
All right. We were at Niagara Falls. Yeah, we went to Hero Pomora, Nauvoo.
Did you decide that you wanted to be a carpenter with what you learned in the Navy? And that's how you decided what you'd do?
I decided I wanted to be a carpenter when I was on my mission. And after I became a carpenter, I built over 600 houses in the Salt Lake Valley.
That's a lot of houses.
It took me 30 years to do it.
Well, that doesn't matter. That's still a lot of houses.
Where did you first live when you first got married?
When we first got married, we bought an 8-unit apartment house, 6 east and 6 south, across the street from the Salt Lake bus lines.
Where Trolley Square is now, right?
You got it.
And you didn't have a refrigerator, did you? You put your milk outside on the windowsill?
Well, we couldn't afford a refrigerator. That's when we first got married.
What memories do you have of your kids growing up?
I have to think about that. I can remember my children helped me build houses.
You started them real young, didn't you? Helping to clean up the yards?
Well, yeah, putting in footings for the foundations.
Even the girls, or were they safe? Just the boys helped you?
Just the boys.
What memories do you have going to Brazil as a family?
Oh, I have to think about that.
Were you surprised when they called you?
Well, I was happy to go back to Brazil to build chapels. I remember when I was on my mission, we spent a lot of time trying to find a room to hold meetings. So I was happy to go back to build chapels.
But you didn't ask to go on the mission, or they didn't say, would you like to? They just said, we'd like you to? That was their idea?
No, I didn't ask. I was called to go.
Because now you go to the bishop and say, I want to go on a mission, and...
No, I didn't ask. The church asked me to go.
What positions did you have in the church?
Well, I remember to start out with as supervisor for the Aaronic priesthood, teachers quorum, deacons, taught Sunday school, president of the high priest group.
Weren't you in the bishopric also?
I was in the bishopric, and I think one reason I was put in the bishopric was to be a work director. The ward had a welfare farm at Riverton, 20 miles there, 20 miles back. And when the elders didn't bring back the dams, I had the choice to go get them or make new ones.
Is there any other experiences you want to tell us about?
Okay, let me think.
Okay.
Chapel in São Paulo, Brazil. And when I got the chapel built, the building committee asked me to build a separate building for a baptism font. When over 20,000 people were baptized in the font, the temple was built in São Paulo, Brazil. And before the temple was dedicated, the blacks received the priesthood. That's all I have on that one. When I was 6 years old, I went with my parents to Denver, Colorado. And on the way home, we were in an accident. And my head went through the windshield. And my mother she sought out the elders and had me minister to. And in that, when I was being a minister to, my mother promised the Lord that I'd always be active in the church.
Well, you've kept that promise for sure.
Hey, I'll tell you this story.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you a story that my father told me. We had an ancestor that was in the English Army. This was in the Revolutionary War. He told his superior officer that he had to take his rifle to be repaired. Then he joined up with the Patriots of the 13 American colonies and fought for the United States.
Wow, that's amazing. So your family has been in America for a very long time then?
Well, my grandparents come here from England. My father took out his homestead in Baggs, Wyoming of August 31st, 1905. The President of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt, signed his homestead deed.
Oh my goodness.
His homestead was 160 acres. And he bought another 120.
Do you still have that farm in Wyoming?
My sister has it, Catherine.
Out of the Navy for 4 months when you met Carol?
Yes. Brazil for 1 year. Carol went on her mission to the Central Atlantic States. She was in Virginia, in North Carolina. That's where the burros are.
Who are the Burrows?
Goldsboro, Greenboroughs.
Oh, I see.
Okay. On my way home from my mission in Brazil, I stopped off in Miami, Florida to see my uncle, my mother's brother, Levi Jensen.
So it was her brother then that baptized her?
No,
No, he was named after the missionary.
Oh, I see.
Home on holiday, I could look out the picture window and see Mount Olympus.
Is that why you bought the lot that you did? So you could look at the mountains every day?
Yes.
And you built this house by yourself or with your sons, or
With my sons.
is there anything you...
23 years ago.
And this was after you got back from Brazil as a family, is that right?
Yes.
How long did it take you to build the house?
Well, I didn't have a crew. I was working by myself. It took me probably about 5 months.
And when you first moved in, you didn't have carpets or anything, did you?
No, we painted the floor.
You painted the floor to make it look like it was a carpet?
Yeah, that was the carpet. That was our carpet.
When you-
Synthetic paint.
When you lived in Wyoming on the farm, did you have a telephone there?
Oh yes, you had to crank it.
Were you on a party line out there with lots of other people on the phone with you?
Our ring was 3 longs.
How far was it to your school from your ranch?
Well, Bags is a mile and a half away.
A mile and a half. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us?
Well, I can't think of anything.
Well, we're glad you're in our family. We appreciate you talking to us and letting us know about August the 11th, 1989, and we're in the home of Hattie McGavin at 1336 Roosevelt Avenue in Salt Lake City, Utah. Hattie, can you tell us your full name, the date you were born, and where you were born?
Yes, I seem to have that ratherly indelibly written on my mind. It was the 7th of August, 1898. And I've always wondered why I wasn't born a little bit earlier so that I wouldn't be a little more than a year older than Cecil, because I thought he should be older. But it worked out just fine. I had to be that far in advance of him to even try to keep up with him. So it's worked out good.
Where were you born, Hattie?
At Woodruff, Idaho, and my father was taking care of my uncle's farm because he was on a mission, and he was taking care of that farm while he was away so that he could have the time to go on his mission and yet have his home taken care of.
Okay, what was your dad's name?
What?
What was your father's name?
My father's name was Henry Parkinson.
Do you know where he was born?
No. He was, don't ask me about the dates now because I should have looked this up last night.
No, it's okay. What was your mom's full name?
My mother's name was Mary Jane John. And John was her surname. And so it seems a little different to have that because it's also a given name more than anything else. But and her father and mother, the whole family came from Wales, and so they had come over here after being converted to the church and settled in a place just over the Idaho line in Utah. And there they stayed until they were sent to somewhere else to settle, because Brigham Young was just scattering them all over after they reached the Utah, so that their land would be numerous acres and have plenty of land to share with not only the ones who are here, but the ones who would come eventually.
Wow, that's pretty exciting. Did you grow up on a farm, too?
Yes, he grew up on a farm, and they were all good farmers. There wasn't much else to do.
Were you the oldest in your family?
Oh, no, I was the 5th child in the family. My father and mother had 8 children, but only 3 of us grew to maturity. And the other 2 have died since then. But in those days they got chicken pox and smallpox and diphtheria and things like that. They had no cure for whatever, no doctors around. So when they got a bad disease like that, for the most part it was fatal. And so there was only 3 of us that grew up to maturity, and one of them died, and then Dee, my sister Dee, she lived to have a family of her own with 6 children, and we all lived there. By this time we were living in Portage, Utah, and that was where I grew up and where my grandpa and grandma John lived, and also it was the place where I started school and eventually taught school there.
Wow. What memories do you have of growing up there?
Oh, just a lot of good memories. one was going out, and I had to milk cows, and I could milk just so long, then my hands would get tired. So my father or somebody else would come to finish. They called it stripping the cow, and they always wanted to get all that milk because that's where the most cream was. And I used to deliver milk up and down the street to my neighbors because we had several cows, and that was our one way of keeping them supplied with milk. And I used to take it to them in quart bottles and got 5 cents a quart for all the milk that I delivered day after day.
Remember anything about your brothers and sisters when you were growing up, different things that you would do together?
Well, we used to go swimming a lot, and we had a big orchard. We used to go out and pick apples and pick plums and things like that. And what my mother didn't want to put up, why we gave to the neighbors, and they would put them up, so that nothing was ever wasted at our house. We just preserved everything and kept it for future time. If we didn't need it then, maybe someday we would. So we would have it already on hand and ready to use.
What was the church like when you were growing up, where you lived?
What was my what?
What was the church like?
Oh, we had a huge church, and it was not divided into rooms, but there were many curtains going every which way across the inside of the church, and that would divide the classes and the people, and separate the different people who came in there for different classes and to participate in different things. And it was just separated by curtains year after year. And it was not until I had grown up and had moved away from Portage before we ever got a beautiful new chapel there.
What was primary like when you were a little girl?
Oh, it was, I guess, pretty much the way it is now. We just go there and have classes. We had primary every Monday afternoon. And that was an absolute necessity to attend primary and religion class and mutual and, there's something else. I said religion class, didn't I? So we had plenty of things to go to and to keep us very busy.
How far away was the church building from where you lived? Did you have to walk there?
Well, yes, it was just down in the next block.
So you walked to church every Sunday?
Oh, yes.
Was Fast Sunday on a Sunday, or did you fast on a different day of the week?
No, we fasted always on Sunday. And we meant, when we fasted, we meant fast. We went from the meal the night before Sunday until it was time for the meal the next day on Sunday. Then we could eat. Another obligation that I had was to see to it that we paid tithing on our earnings. For instance, when we would gather the eggs, and we had a lot of chickens, so when we would gather the eggs, they were put in a huge case and or pan or something of that nature, and then I would have to go and put them in a egg case for Peddler Jones to come and pick them up the following week. He came every week to pick up our eggs, and as I picked up these eggs, I would put 10 eggs in one of these pans, and then take one of those eggs out, put it over into an egg case, and that would be what would be taken down to the tithing office as our tithing. So that was our one way of paying our tithing on our income. And it was really a delightful experience, and it would have been impossible for me to have ever grown up without a testimony of the divinity of the law of tithing, because I was taught it from the time that I was able to walk and go around until right now. And so I have always believed, and I've always known exactly what tithing is. It's 1/10 of your income.
Okay. Can you tell us something about the school that you went to, the elementary school when you were young?
Well, we had 4 or 5 grades in one classroom when we were growing up, and of all the things that they emphasized the most was reading, writing, and arithmetic, and we had to practice on this, and we saw to it that we had classes in these every day, and we were taught phonics, so that any words we didn't know, we could sound them out and find out what they are. And spelling, we would have to write down the words in spelling, write it down 10 times. This is when we were studying spelling. We'd write it down about 10 times, and then we'd spell it, and then after a while, we would feel like we had it pretty well. Then we'd have spelling matches. Different ones in the class would get up and choose the words that they wanted, or the ones that they wanted to be on their side in the spelling bee. And invariably, they would always choose me for the first one. And you know why? Because I was a good speller. And I was very happy about it, and got along very well. And
did you have a favorite teacher there, or did you have the same teacher the whole time you were there?
Well, I had quite a few teachers. We only had 3 teachers in the whole school, and that took care of all the 8th grades that were taught there. And then eventually, when I was grown up, I taught there for a year, and knew what a great job and also a wonderful blessing it was to contact smaller children who knew less than you and whom you could help so much. So I had thoroughly enjoyed my growing up in that area.
What kind of work did your dad do? Was he a farmer, or did he do other...
He was a farmer, yes.
Did he do anything else on the side to bring money in?
No, he didn't have time for anything else much. And, of course, he had a lot of cows, and the milkman came around and took our cream, and this would be every night after the cows had been milked, or else early in the morning after they had been milked in the morning. And so the milk was always sold when it was very fresh. And that was our main way of sustaining ourselves and, having a little money on hand to do with what we wanted to do.
Do you remember any church jobs that your mom or dad had?
Oh, they were very busy, and Dad was he was in bishoprics, and he was a home teacher and everything of that nature. And of course, my mother worked a great deal in Relief Society and things like that. And my mother and sister, my sister Dee, were very popular singing duets. And whenever there was funerals in the ward, they always sang together. And I don't know why I didn't get any of their talent, because
you're not a singer?
I can sing along with the people, but I could never sing a solo or a duet, no matter what. So.
Okay. When did you move to Salt Lake? Was it after you married?
Oh yes, it was a long time after I was married. Of course, I came down here and went to the University of Utah.
What was that like when you came? Was it an adventure for you moving away from home?
Did I what?
Was it an adventure for you moving away from home?
Oh, no, not much. We just 3 or 4 of us came down here together and lived together and went up to the university. And that was when I got my teaching certificate so that I could teach school in the elementary classes. And that was when I started earning a little money. And although the salary was very small and not making very much, it seemed like a fortune to me because it came to me every month. And I managed very well.
Did all the friends that came up with you, did they all graduate too, or were you the only one?
Yes, but, well, first of all, of course, we went to the Box Elder High School. And that was when I had a wonderful time, too. And it was there that I met one who became a very special boyfriend of mine, Alfred Hanson. And I started going with him, and we used to do a lot of things, and especially dance. Everybody danced in those days, and it was a good old time, waltzes and 2-steps and things of that nature, so that it was really a pleasure to go to some entertainment and dance with all these people.
Did you have dances at church too?
Oh yes, dances were at church too. And we had a huge church, and it had a wonderful floor for it to be a place of entertainment too. To have a good time, and all my life I wanted to go on a mission. And I didn't know how I could ever go because my father didn't have any income, scarcely at all, except what he took in from his farm. And then, of course, in the harvest season each fall, he would get so much money for his grain and farm stuff which he sold. And but I kept talking about wanting to fill a mission. And he says, well, he says, I don't know. He says, it costs quite a bit to go on a mission. But he says, if you ever get a call, I will see to it that you are provided for, and will keep you there until it is time for you to come home. So don't worry about it, and I hope that one day you do. So after I had graduated from high school and had taught school for 1 year, I had a little bit of a bank account saved up for my first few months, and things then were just cheap, but of course to us they didn't seem cheap because that was what was the going price then. But I enjoyed it very much and was just waiting for that call to come. But in the interim, I had been going with Alfred Hanson very, very steady. And finally, we began to talk about getting married. And I told him, well, I says, I want to get married and all that, but I don't want to get married until I have filled a mission. And I says, I don't know when that'll be, or if it's going to, or if I'm even going to get a call. But I do want to fill a mission first. And he says, well, that will be just fine. He says, I will wait for you. And so, in just a little while after that, I was still teaching school, and this year I was teaching school in Brigham City. And he was from Brigham City, so that made it nice for us. And we had a lot of fun together. And then after being down there for this quite a long time and of waiting for a mission call or something, it finally came. But in the interim, he had given me a diamond. And we had planned that should I get my call to go on a mission, that he would, that we would be married soon after he came home, because he was sure. He didn't have a father, and his mother was well, she had quite a responsibility with the other 2 or 3 children. So he didn't plan on going on a mission. And so after so long, why we waited, and finally that mission call came. And I talked to my father about it. He says, by all means, he says, you are to accept that call to go on a mission. And so I told Alf about it, and Alf was all in favor of it too. He thought that would be a very nice experience for me. And so that was when I began to prepare for it. And my call came in September of 1919. And I went almost immediately. And my call was to the Eastern States Mission. And that comprised all the Eastern States Mission, from Maine way down to the southern states, and over almost to the central states, and up practically to the Canadian border. It was a huge area. And my first call was to labor in Huntington, West Virginia. And, or no, it was New Haven, Connecticut. And there my first companion was Stella Richards. And she was a very faithful, sweet soul, and took a very good care of me and everything. And it was quite a bit older than I, so I was pretty well taken care of. And then after laboring with her for some time, I was called to labor with Emma Lindsay, and she was a very, very famous singer in the Tabernacle Choir in Salt Lake. And so we were kept very busy with her singing, and I was always speaking wherever we went. And so that made it very nice for each of us. And after a while, we decided that was a thing for us to do, was to do that, and just to remain together. But first of all, I was sent from New Haven, Connecticut, down to Huntington, West Virginia. That was a long ways away, and I just didn't know whether I was happy about it or whether I wasn't. But after you get down there and become acquainted with the missionaries that you have to work with, and the saints who are so nice and kind and considerate of you, you love it just like you do every place else that you have ever been. So that's where I was for a long time. And after I had been there for a while, I met I met so many missionaries and so many elders, and they were all so outstanding. And of course, they'd all been out longer than I had, so they were very well informed. And on this occasion, I loved being with the ones who knew the most. And the one that I thought stood out the most of any in the group was a young elder, and his name was E. Cecil McGavin. And oh, how much I enjoyed him. You could ask him a question anytime, anywhere, but what he'd know the answer, and not only could quote it to you, but he could give you chapter and verse where you could find it. And it was just a marvelous experience for me to know him. Well, after we had been there for quite a while, I thought that he was almost too smart to be a missionary or to be with us. But he was so nice and so kind to me, and everything. And finally, he confessed that he was falling in love with me, and he hoped that I was with him. I says, I have been in love with you ever since you came. But I says, I haven't dared to tell anybody about it. And he says, well, he says, I do. He says, I dare. But he says, I have still got a little time left for my mission, and you have quite a bit of time. So let us just go on from there. And so we did. And as time went on, when President George W. McGavin, who was our mission president, came down to West Virginia to visit with us, Cecil met with him and told him that he had met a lady missionary that he was very much in love with, but he wanted to finish his mission, and he wanted to be transferred from where he was. And I thought, of all the things in the world that I thought was ridiculous, was to ask to be transferred. So, anyhow, I guess that President McGavin thought the same thing, because he was, Cecil was transferred to Binghamton, New York, miles and miles and miles away. And there, I knew that we could keep on writing, but I didn't know how. Well, anyhow, in just a little while, 3 or 4 months after that, Cecil was released and came home. We kept on writing to each other, and then finally, when my time approached, which was not until the following spring, when my time was up, I was supposed to stay out there the 18 months, and then they changed it to 21 months, and by then, well, I felt like I was really deep dyed in the wool in preaching the gospel, and I was very happy to be called to labor in Pittsburgh at that time, because I just had such a short time left for my mission to be served, and so I waited, and then when Cecil was released and came home, he started going to Rick's College up in Ricksburg, Idaho, because he lived in his home was in Marysville, Idaho, not very far from there. And after a while, we stayed there, and I stayed there, and really learned to like it a great deal, more and more all the time. And finally, when it came time for me to be released, why, they said that I would be sent to released from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which I was. And so after I got there and got my release, I came home in the middle of the summer, long about May or June. I had been out there 2 or 3 months longer than I had anticipated staying. And of course, all the schools in Utah were filled up because they had started so early, and so they all had their teachers. There was no chance whatever for me to get a job. And finally, one of the school officials from Rexburg, Idaho, came to Portage to visit with his brother and his family, who were also living there. And when he did that, why, I told him about my predicament. I says, I have a teaching certificate, but I says, I can't get a job. I says, all the schools are filled up. They've all got their teachers, and they're all ready to start, because this was long about possibly July or August, and the school will be starting in September. And I says, I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, he says, well, don't give up yet. He says, I'll see how we are doing up in the Rexburg area. He says, that's where I am the superintendent. And so immediately after he went home, or went to back to school there, up to Rexburg, where he was the superintendent, he talked to the people there, and they said that they had 2 or 3 vacancies, and they had one vacancy at the Hibbard School in Rexburg for the 5th grade. I loved the 5th grade because they were smarter than the other youngsters. They worked harder, were more concerned, more grown up, and so I was very happy to talk to him about going there.
Well, what did you say to Alf Hansen, the guy that had given you that diamond when you came home?
I'm coming to that.
Oh, okay.
And so after I had been there for quite some time, and I got my first check, $125 a month, I thought I was a millionaire. I never was so thrilled over anything in my life as I was my first check for teaching school up in Idaho. And of course, another great asset was that Cecil was going to Rick's College in Rexburg, and he was very busy. He didn't have a car. He lived quite a long ways away, and we couldn't spend a lot of time together, but we always arranged to go to a dance or something together. He'd get with one of his pals, and they'd come and pick me up in a buggy, and we'd go to a dance here, there, everywhere, and it was fun. I just enjoyed it thoroughly. So time went on, and I liked it. I liked it very much, and especially the salary that I was getting. And this went on for the rest of the year. And finally, when Thanksgiving came, Cecil folks told him to invite me to come up to Marysville with him for the Thanksgiving vacation. That would be the following November, which he did. And that was the first time that I had ever seen any of his relatives or anybody like that. And he had quite a multitude. There was 8 in his family, and not any of them were married yet. So we had a very, very good time. And I discovered that they were a very religious family, that they saw to it that they got to church all on time, that they always had things ready and were well organized and were getting along very well. So I went up there, and I think that it was, I was so impressed with his mother, much more so than his father, and I did enjoy being accepted so wholeheartedly with them. And so we made arrangements that we would be married the following year, that I would finish out my year teaching at the Hibbard School, and then we could be married the next September and go to school or whatever came up then. And that was when I went back to the Hibbard School, finished out the year, and then went home. I didn't see Cecil again until when we parted in June, when my school was out. I didn't see him again until the week before he was to start to school down at Rick's, and so I was managing very well and was going. I still had everything pretty well taken care of and everything of that nature. So after we had been there for quite some time, I got a chance to teach. Oh, where did I go then? Anyhow, I got more money for my next job teaching than I had had before, and then when he came down to register at the BYU, we decided that we should get married then, and that I would just run the risk of finding a job after I got married. Well, instead of that, I just enjoyed so much being around where he was and everything, and so anyhow, we got married on the 20th of September, 1922.
What happened to Alfred?
And
What did you tell him?
I had written to Al before this and told him that I was contemplating marriage, and then he wrote back and he says, I guess that's quite understandable, and he says, you will be surprised to know that I have my call for a mission to serve in the Northern States Mission. So he says, I will be gone for 2 years, and I guess you wouldn't want to be waiting around that long. So he says, I can understand rather well, he says, how you're feeling about it. And so that's, he took it very good. And then I wrote back to him and I says, I still have your beautiful diamond. And I says, what shall I do about it? Shall I save it and give it to you? Shall I mail it to you, or what shall I do? And he wrote back and he says, don't do either one. He says, just keep it. He says, that ring was bought for you. And he says, just keep it. And he says, and when you look at your hands and see that beautiful diamond, you will have to think about me. Well, we were at the Brigham Young University right after our marriage, and we got a very nice apartment just across the street and a block south of the Brigham Young University, and that's when they were holding school only on the lower campus. And we lived in Monavoo Ward, and loved it. We just thought that was the greatest mission ever was. And so in no time at all, we met a lot of returned missionaries, and we formed what was called the YDD Club. And that was the Young, meaning Brigham Young, of course, Young Doctors of Divinity. And we stayed together as a group for the 4 years that Cecil was down there at the Brigham Young University. And oh, how we loved it there. And then I got a job teaching down there too. And then I also, in the summer when I wasn't in school, I worked at the quality control at the woolen mills in Provo, and that paid pretty good money. So we got along just fine. And then at the end of that period, in the fall of 1924, Cecil had signed up for a job teaching seminary, and he was so happy about that because that's really what he was prepared for. He loved the church and everything, and had always been studying, and bright. He could tell you anything you wanted to know about anything about the church, and especially the church history. So that turned out for us very well. And so he, in addition to teaching this religious class one a day, he was to also teach some classes at the Alamo High School, and that was in Alamo, Nevada, and we were happy about that. And it turned out well for us because at this time we were expecting a baby, and in 1925 in Alamo, Nevada, Gordon was born, and I was very unhappy because we had not a doctor, it was just a midwife who lived in Alamo, and I could have gone over to Las Vegas or to some of the places around there pretty close. And by the way, being in Nevada, he got a very, very good salary teaching. And after being there for this short time, we thought, well, it's time. We discussed whether or not I should come home when Gordon was born, or whether I should stay there and just try to manage the best way we can. It was my first baby, and I was very, very stupid. I thought it was more necessary to have Cecil with me when the baby was born than it was to have a doctor, a nurse, or a hospital. But I learned a lesson. And anyhow, he was born in, when?
25.
1925, but what?
January.
Well, anyhow, he was born in Alamo, Nevada. Oh, on the 10th of February, no?
Mother, January.
January the 29th, 1925. And, well, I just got through saying we were married in 1925. Well,
No, you got married in 1922, you said.
Oh, yeah, we were married in 1922, excuse me. And so that's how it was. And I had a bad, bad time. I'm still having a bad, bad time. And from now on, take professional help before you do accept the help or thinking the company of the one that you love is more necessary than professional help. Profit by my experience, because I've suffered from then until now because of the lack of experience. And however, he got along fine, and I have managed. Got 3 more children. Carol was the next one born, and when?
7th of April, 1929.
7th of April, 1939?
29.
1929. And then June was born, was Carl next?
June.
June was born, when was June born?
26th of November, 32.
26th of November, 32. And Carl was the last one, and he was born in Spanish Fork after Cecil had been transferred. When we were transferred from Nevada, he went to Spanish Fork, Utah, to teach seminary there. And that was where we lived for 10 years, and where my family, for the most part, grew up. And we loved it very much. And I don't know, it's just been nip and tuck from then on. We've just been getting along one way or another. But all this long time, we had been renting a home. And we said, when we move again, we wanted to be a permanent home. We wanted to buy it. When you get through paying your month's rent and have lived out the month there, you don't have anything to show for it. So we said that when we move again, we're going to move in what we are going to have as a permanent home. So, and that's what happened when we were transferred from there to Salt Lake City. And we have loved it here. And we came up to Salt Lake from Spanish Fork after all this long time being there. We came up here one Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon to look for a home to move to or to buy when we came to Salt Lake, and we were brought right directly to this place where we're sitting here now. And I think we looked at a couple more homes, and then when he talked to us and found out that he was a teacher and all this, that, and the other, and that we had sort of high ideals and wanted to move into a good area and all that, he says, I don't believe that you like it here as well as you will up more toward Foothill Drive. And so he brought us directly to this place, told us the price of it. We signed up, and we had made our trip from Provo up to here, found a home, made arrangements to buy it, and got back to a party that they were giving for us that night by the state board or the state high council in Spanish Fork, because we were going to move in about another week. And we certainly had a full lineup of parties from then until we did move in June of when did we move to Salt Lake?
38.
In 1938.
Do you remember how much this house cost you to buy?
It was not very much. I don't really remember very much. What I think about it is in the hundreds of dollars, and I think it must surely have been a few thousand, but I'm not sure.
It was 5,000.
5,000? Well, I hope Carol's right that it was 5,000, because I really don't remember, and I wasn't concerned. But then after, of course, my family, they were getting quite grown up by now, and so I started, after my experience that I had had with the Utah Woolen Mills in Provo, I was quite experienced here, so I got a job at the Woolen Mills here in Salt Lake and started working there, and got pretty good pay. I turned every penny that I made over to Cecil to apply on our home, and in 5 years we had not only bought a home, moved into it, was all settled, had our furniture, everything was just going fine, but we also had it paid for in full in a period of about 5 years. And that was because not only what Cecil could spare and still maintain the family, why I added my money, which I made at the Utah Woolen Mills.
Was it Remington Arms where you worked?
What was Remington Arms?
During the war, you worked at Remington Arms.
During World War II? Do you remember working there?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I
you didn't work at the Woolen Mills. You worked at Remington Arms.
Oh, indeed it was. That was down on Redwood Road and 17th South.
What did you do there? Do you remember?
Yes, I was in quality control, just the same as I had been with everything else that I had taken over. And I was just starting out, but I remember what a good salary I got right from the very beginning. It would only be pennies today, but it sure seemed like a lot to me then. So we got along just fine. And
tell me about the mission you went on to Hawaii.
Well, after we had, let's see, we went on another mission, Oh, while during the period that we had just Gordon, we were called on a mission to California. We lived in Palo Alto, California, and it was just a few blocks from. It's not Yale down there, is it? What is
Stanford?
it? Little Stanford University. And so Cecil took a class up there at Little Stanford, spent time teaching in a class there in high school, a religious class, and I was just taking care of Gordon for a while. And then after we got a babysitter and I found out that I could do so well if I started working, and that's what I started doing. And with both of us on the payroll and Gordon taken care of, we managed very, very well. You what?
Is there anything else you want to tell us?
Oh yes, I must tell you that after leaving Spanish Fork, we were very sad at leaving, but we just felt like it was something that was good for Cecil. He was getting a good job in Salt Lake City, and this is where we wanted to be. And besides that, our children were getting grown up, and we had our entire family by now, and we were getting along very well. And I was especially happy because I could keep so busy in the church. And all my life, all I have done is teach, teach, teach. I was either giving a lesson or preparing a lesson day after day, and just kept that up all my life. And I was always associated with women and girls. And I worked on the state board in Relief Society for 26 years. And that, of course, some of the time was spent as a theology teacher in Relief Society. Some of the time, most of the time, it was spent as the stake leader in theology in 3 different stakes, yet we always lived in this same house. And so we got along very well that way, and we loved the people up here. We were received very graciously, and I just kept on being a teacher, and the last classes that I taught were in 1985. And that was in Wasatch Ward. And I started teaching when I was 14 years of age in the Portage Ward in Malad State. So I had a long years of experience as a teacher, and it was always with women and girls whom I have learned to love throughout my life. And no matter where I go now, or used to go when Cecil and I used to travel around, when he was traveling with the BYU Education Week, or the Book of Mormon lectures, or just teaching here, there, and everywhere. I always find somebody that I know who knows me, and they can come up and tell me who I am. And of course I don't know them, because by now they have a family of little kids, and I've just forgotten, because I taught them so when they were young and growing up, and it has made a difference. But the one glorious experience of my life has been being able to go with Cecil everywhere he went on all these lecture tours. And in what year did we go to Europe, Carol?
I don't know.
we went to Europe with the BYU education class, and as a chaperones, and Cecil and I would both talk to them each time about places where we were going, or what had happened here, or converts that come from this country or that country. And we went all over Europe, and we spent 31 days in Europe, traveling around, and we were even invited into the Russian country, and spent a day and a half there. They furnished a free luncheon for us, and then later on, when we went back over into the mainland of Europe, we were invited out to the Onassis Island. That's out in the Mediterranean, and that's where Jackie
Kennedy?
Jackie Kennedy and her husband had bought this island, and they were very, very wealthy. So we had a very enjoyable trip there, and they also furnished the transportation for our whole group, which comprised about, I think there was more than 50 in our group. And besides furnishing transportation for us, they furnished us a delicious luncheon and took us back to our hotels, or motels, whatever, in Italy. And we just had a very delightful time over there. And it was an experience that I shall never forget and never, never, ever experience again. So I am grateful for all these wonderful favors and the blessings that have come to us, and it has all come to us through the gospel of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where we have both been very, very valiant all our lives in carrying on this work. And of course we love it very much. After our children were all married and we were free, we have still been going around just Sunday after Sunday, speaking here and there and talking to groups all over the country. And this kept on until Cecil became very ill in 19 what?
Oh, I'd say maybe 73 or 4.
Yeah, in the early 1970s, and he struggled on. He had some very serious operations. I'm not going to tell you about them because there were too many and happening too often. So we were just kept very, very busy, and enjoyed it thoroughly. And the strange thing of it is that all this took place after he had recovered sufficiently to go around with the on these different lecture tours, things of that nature, and able to perform the work and the jobs that were given to him to do as an ambassador of the Brigham Young University. And it was delightful. And if there's anything in this world that I want to thank more than anybody else, it's the dear people who kept us busy, giving us jobs to do, and doing things like that all the time. And especially for Cecil's health, which after he was handicapped, as he was for the last few years of his life, he still was able to go about teaching the youth and the oldsters about the things about the gospel and no one will ever know the lives that he has touched and made possible for them to gain a testimony of the gospel. There is nothing that I appreciate more than my testimony of the gospel. It is truly the power of God unto salvation, and we have been blessed beyond our greatest expectations. The things, the problems and things that have come to us in many ways, and yet we always come out all right. And we found out early in life that it was our attitude that carried us through. Anything that we were asked to do, if we wanted to do it, we always did want to do it. We just went ahead, started doing it, and one thing after another would open sources and ways and means for us to not only gain a greater testimony for ourselves, but also to teach the gospel to other people so that they could appreciate it. The gospel is the greatest source of peace and comfort and happiness that can come to anyone's life. And no one can ever be totally happy without a knowledge of the gospel, and better still, preparing oneself to live its gospel to the fullest extent of our ability. For it is the gospel of Jesus Christ, and we have been blessed abundantly, and we are both, have been a living witness to the great blessings that come to one who try to serve the Lord in peace and happiness, because that is what comes to them. And I bear you this testimony solemnly and with gratitude for all the things that have come to me and mine, and I can attribute all of it to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And even Cecil's death, some 14 years ago, it was 14 years on the 28th of last July, 1980.
75. Right, I understand, yeah. It was 14 years ago this year.
Yes, 14 years ago, this in 89, that just gave us all the things that were necessary to make it. And I thought I couldn't manage without him. I have never been so busy, and just kept going all the time. But now I'm more or less handicapped with arthritis or whatever else they want to call it, and have kind of homebound now. But I'm even enjoying that. So there is happiness for everyone if they will only realize from whence happiness comes, and then strive to keep the commandments which brings it. And this I bear solemn testimony in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Hattie. We love you, and we're glad you're in our family. You've got a great heritage, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it too.